Today, Wednesday, we will speak about the question of consciousness, independent even from bloodstream. It is something integral, inherent to our work out of anthroposophy, the question of soul capacities, of ability to see beyond what is obvious, the question of clairvoyance. And so from a certain point of view, it may be paradoxical to think that actually for Christ being to incarnate, for the Redeemer to incarnate, it was necessary for this particular stream of humanity to shed every possible influence of this ancient wisdom, of the ancient vision. So in the language of the Old Testament, of course, these clairvoyant capacities, these visionary capacities of communing with different spiritual beings is always presented as a conflict between the tribe of Jacob, the Israelites, the warriors of God, and I mean it in a spiritual way, not in a national way, their fight and striving against the folks adjacent to them or people who are mixing with them and their gods. It was necessary to make space in this promised land where not only genetic foundation of a particular body, chalice for incarnation would be provided, but again, also that the stage would be swept and cleansed from any influences of the atavisms. And these atavisms sometimes would be very, very handy, in fact, the entire pre-Abrahamic world with these two biggest empires, Babylonia and Egypt, they were operating out of communing, out of direct perception of the spiritual world. So entire systems, kingdoms, their politics, their culture, their wisdom, their everything, the way the people lived all the way to their families and tribes was mingling with through clairvoyant vision. Spiritual beings were just part of their existence. And people would never even ask the question about what is this? This was just normal. This was just how it was, instinctive. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob are cutting through this, in a certain sense, cutting their own wings. And that's, in this cutting their own wings, on one hand, brings a necessity to bring about tools to really live on earth. From Abraham, according to the ancient legends, the skills of geometry, mathematics, navigation, all this is related to this gift of the brain, which Abraham is first in possession. Then this blinding of the third eye in Isaac, which turns him more and more, and those after him, into the world of senses, not the super sensible, lofty spaces. And with Jacob, this zeal to really protect that new legacy is later spilled and poured on his 12 sons, the protagonists, the originators of the 12 streams within humanity, the tribes of Israel, which we have to understand is not, again, something that is exclusive to what we call Israelites today, but they are 12 streams that from Jacob pour into the genetics of humanity. And with that, you have this mystery and the promise that was given to Abraham, Genesis 15. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abraham in vision and said, "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great." He brought him outside and said, "Look towards the heavens and count the stars, if you are able to count them." Then he said, "So shall your descendants be." This promise of descendants as stars, again, it has nothing to do with plenty, with the volume of how many stars there is, but in these words, the mystery of the formative forces streaming from the constellations, from the stars, is being spoken of. God says to Abraham, your tribe, your descendants, in their ether body all the way to their physical form, will be the perfect reflection of the formative forces of the cross of heaven, which is the origins of creation. This is something that is imprinted on Abraham's, later on Isaac's and Jacob's ether body. The body of formative forces, something that you hear in our service. And with Jacob, through Leah and through Rachel, this is being planted in his 12 sons. So in those 12 streams, genetic, spiritual streams that originate with Jacob, like the rays of sun that permeate the darkness of the world, that promise of harmony of stars is becoming flesh. The word becomes flesh. Supersensible again becomes quality of particular section of humanity. And it goes from this point on. And in reality, it's not just a direct movement that everything is so obvious. Every single step of this Christ incarnation, he's not called Christ as yet, even. He is known as El Elyon, the highest God. Only out of the deepest mysteries, which we'll speak about tomorrow when we get to Melchizedek and his story. Melchizedek is the only one at this point out of his mystery stream and temple that can actually name that being. Christ, El Elyon, the originator, the original spirit out of the whole cosmos and the human being, has sprung forth, is looking to find chalice and host his body and culture for himself, but does it without being named yet. Different spiritual beings serve on this way as kind of a translators or messengers. One of them is, for instance, Yahweh. Yahweh is a chalice, spiritual chalice, into which the consciousness of Christ, El Elyon, pours as an intermediary between this eternity and the world of human beings. And for a time being, from about the time of Abraham, more precisely from Moses' time, he serves as a kind of a regent and a director in this process of Christ's nascent and humanity preparing the body. This quality of Yahweh is also related to that cutting off from the residues from the residues of the old clairvoyance, of the old consciousness. It is necessary. Yahweh's nature, his signature, is that of a moon consciousness. So something very formal. And in order so that beginning with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, human body receives more and more solid form, and is not kind of extending into the universe, spiritual universe, Yahweh gives his seal, his imprint, which from a certain point of view brings about this radical shift from the cosmos to earth, forms, numbers, dimensions. This is Yahwehic spirituality, Jehovah, moon spirituality, versus El Elyon is still in cosmic spaces, and between them two are those remnants of the ancient sun-like clairvoyance vision. One step forward, two steps backwards, perhaps. Out of 12 sons that Jacob, whose new name, as you remember, is Israel, the warrior of God, have with his two wives, he loves Joseph the most. Joseph is the second youngest, born out of Rachel. And Joseph is different than his brothers. He has an aura around him that is almost too mystical for them. It's important to remember that, except for one, for Benjamin, all 11 sons of Jacob, Israel, they were actually by birth Mesopotamians. They were Babylonians too. They're not Jews. They're not Israelis. There was no Israel before when they were born. Israel received name Israel when they were coming back from Babylon back to the promised land. Out of them, Joseph has this aura that is very much still rooted in the Babylonian mysteries, in the Babylonian splendor. He is in a way representative among these 12 stars that brings them back still to the ancient clairvoyance. And his father loves him. It's almost as Jacob, Israel himself, is longing for this ability to see beyond the formal, the cut-off, the chiseled Yahweh world that he not only inherited, but he is responsible to prepare for the future. And as a signature of this love, he gives Joseph this beautiful coat. You remember that from your religious instruction, the coat of many fragments, which was a ceremonial coat with which but the Babylonians would cover the sculptures of their gods. And all of a sudden, this kid, beautiful 17 years old, looking very feminine, with this kind of auric look around him, receives this coat. And his brothers are already very upset about it. Moreover, he has these dreams. He's not even aware how visionary he is. He lives between two worlds. And for him, there's no difference between the world of dream and the formal world of daytime activity. And that brings his demise. One day he comes to his brothers and said, I had this amazing dream. I've dreamt that 11 bundles of wheat were lowering themselves and bowing down in front of me. And his brothers right away says, what do you think, who do you think you are? You think that you're higher than us? So already into this antipathy caused by him being Jacob's beloved, there is this actually total antagonism poured in. They, coming from the consciousness of this necessity of a very strong, formal, dry conditions that is given to them to develop, they more and more hate Joseph. They want to get rid of him. They want to cast out old atavistic clairvoyance together with him. And after yet another dream and yet another situation, this is what happens. First, they're trying to kill him. They are in the fields. He brings the message from his father. They seize him and they throw him into a hole. And the word in Hebrew that is used for this hole is exactly the same word that is used for grave. And they keep him there. They have an intention to actually leave him there. But after 3 days, they get to their senses, and Judas, one of the son of Israel, Judas, same name that you heard from the altar today, it says, we shouldn't be doing this. It's too much, killing our own. Let's sell him. So you see those two gestures, throwing Joseph to the hole where he spends 3 days and nights, and then actually Judas has this impulse to sell him, and he sells him to a caravan that goes to Egypt for 12 pieces of silver. Of course, you must think about the events that we read about, the fragment from the Gospel of Mark, when Judas Iscariot has the intention to sell Christ, and the consequences that it has, that will lead to death and 3-day initiation of the world, of Golgotha. The story of Joseph is interesting. I can't speak about all this, it would be way too long for us today, but just to give you a few signature points. He's being taken by this caravan, and again, that aura of a divine youth of Babylonian religion, this god Tammuz, Adonis. There's something of Adonis character, of aura around Joseph. This gives him always, even in the worst circumstances, gives him good karma, good luck. And he is being brought to Egypt. Then there are a series of situations that he goes through until finally he ends up in jail. But in jail, it is known that he has this capacity to not only he has very visionary consciousness, but he also has a capacity to interpret the dreams already by now. So you see something happen in those 3 days, 3 nights that he was placed in the hole. Must have gone through, unbeknownst to his oppressors, to his brothers, they actually helped him to go through a spontaneous initiation in which something of this Yahweh force of formalizing, of interpreting, of understanding is imprinted on him. So not only now he's bestowed with the capacity of vision, but he can also interpret those visions. So while in jail in Egypt, destiny has it that he interprets dreams of 2 people who are sitting in jail together with him. They happen to be high officials, perhaps even priests from the Pharaoh's court. He interprets their dreams. And strangely enough, these dreams bring about the mood, the echo of, again, of bread and wine. You see that the symbols of bread and wine are included there. At some point, the news reaches Pharaoh, who is tormented by his dreams too. He has dreams, very, very difficult dreams. No one of his advisors can interpret those things. And the dreams have to do with 7 healthy ears of wheat, 7 healthy bulls and cows, and then another set of pictures in this dream, 7 withering ears of grain and 7 skinny, bony, deadly-looking cows. Someone says to Pharaoh, there is this fella, a Hebrew, in the jail, he knows how to interpret dreams. And so destiny, karma, good luck, brings Joseph to this opportunity to explain to Pharaoh what is the content of his vision. And see, this is where it's so paradoxical how this plan of divine world is playing itself out. They are not just dreams that Pharaoh has. They're symptoms of the great decline of the past clairvoyant vision upon which the entire state was operating for thousands of years, hundreds of generations. So out of just conditions of the world, also related to this nascent of Christ towards the earth, something that Rudolf Steiner calls the Kali Yuga, the age of great darkness, gradually descends upon civilizations of Babylonia and Egypt. And for Egyptians, that means the end of everything, because they could only, let's say, specifically build those buildings, operate their politics and their rituals of the year and years, because they had direct vision into the spirit. But now something is dimming in them, so they're lost. And in that dream, Pharaoh has first intuition of that. And then destiny sends him this Hebrew who not only still shares with Pharaoh that part of consciousness, ancient consciousness, that he can see in the world of pictures, but like no one else in Egypt, he can also interpret. That means he can devise and design new protocols and new schedules so that the Egyptian culture and civilization can actually go forth. Cast out by his own, due to surplus of the forces of consciousness that were unnecessary for the 12 tribes, yet becomes a blessing and remedy for the Egyptian civilization. And you know, the story is that he becomes incredibly influential. He becomes the second in the country. He becomes a high priest, in fact, because he's married. Pharaoh marries him to the daughter of the archpriest of Heliopolis, the ancient city of the sun. So de facto, through that, we know that Joseph becomes the archpriest of Egyptian mysteries. And yet he's not an Egyptian, he's a Hebrew, so he has that Yahweh ability to count, to figure it out, to dimensionalize, right? To incarnate spiritual into practical. That saves Egypt. Not only, all of a sudden, of course, that crisis of Kali Yuga, of course, spreads out all over the world, also reaches the promised land when his brothers and old father are still. In the Bible, you hear it as a hunger, period of hunger. So so this hunger is not only physical hunger, but it's also spiritual hunger. Even they who kind of went hardcore into cutting off the remnants of the entire ancient wisdom, way ahead the event of Kali Yuga would actually take place, right? They're ahead of their curve, of their time. Even they feel hunger. So in order to, and they hear something is happening in Egypt, whereby from which we can still draw and have energy and power to live. Because there is no economy, there is no spiritual life, there is no pedagogy, there is nothing without spiritual life. That's the truth. Right? So they hear we need to go to Egypt. They don't know. They assume that Joseph maybe was killed, died. They have no idea that it's him who is the source of renewal in Egypt. Long story short, I hope you can read all this. It's a beautiful story. They come, there's twice they come. Finally, he recognizes them right away. And he's in a position of power. He can destroy them right away. He tests them. He puts them to trials, but they are not severe trials until finally tell them to bring their old father, Israel, Jacob, to Egypt, together with everyone else, of course, the whole tribes, 12 tribes. He reveals himself to his brothers. There's this beautiful moment of compassionate meeting, reconciliation, tears of joy, and again, something from the purely Christ gesture signature is enters as new the evolution, cultural evolution of mankind. Those things are gradual. It takes 1,000 years for the Christ to really penetrate, incarnate, embodied the body of a human being, Jesus of Nazareth. Thousands of year preparation. Long historical Holy Week. And that Egyptian story of Joseph is almost as if a Wednesday of that long epochs of cosmic historical Holy Week. 400 years, the Hebrews, the Israelites live in Egypt. 400 years, that's more than 12 generations again, maybe 15 generations. Imagine through that time, something of this strict, Yahweh, dry, moon-like, orthodox quality of their consciousness pre these events is actually, again, influenced heavily by their environment, cultural environment of Egypt. Again, step in, step back. Something from the Egyptian element penetrates the soul, national soul, etheric body of the Hebrews. This distillation. Think about panning gold. When you pan gold, you take a bunch of sand and water, and there's this lemniscate movement that you have to make, panning. And out of this movement, sand is being washed away, water is being washed away, mud is being washed away, until finally, if you're lucky, you find a nugget. This is something that is happening over hundreds of years of these spiritual soul processes of distillation of new consciousness. 400 years. And Joseph is long gone. Of course, we must assume that those Hebrews were very highly esteemed by the Egyptians through Joseph, through his service to the Pharaoh, but also because they had this new type of intelligence. And as it is often, after many generations, circumstances have changed, and it all turns against the Hebrews, against the Israelites. The persecution begins. The children are being killed by Ramses II. That brings about new will, they as if wake up out of the suffering, that good life that they have, and also in a certain sense that the security of again, falling back into the old soul qualities, that old clairvoyant vision that gives them security of dwelling with gods. Everything is simple. In fact, Pharaoh is God, so what's there to worry? You see him with your eyes. Even out of this comfort, they slowly start feeling through their suffering, we must go. We don't know where. We once dreamed about the promised land. We had mission. Maybe they forgot about it for 400 years. It's a long period of time, as long as this nation. longer than this nation. Imagine, maybe we here, born, whatever generation, maybe we're born actually in bondage, but we're not about it. We don't know about it. Maybe we're in Egypt. Maybe we, spiritual beings, we forgot that this is not the end destination for us, what we have, as we call the United States of America, as we know it today. But it's comfortable. It gives us security. It gives us boundaries. But what if this is not it yet? I'm not saying physically, geographically, but as an actual emanation of that promised land that the forefathers have been promised. Each of these stories that I chose, I'm choosing representational stories. They're as important, each of these individualities are as important as two Jesus children on the way of bringing the body for the Christ. Historically, they're a little bit more remote, but they are in the course of development of building that body, this new consciousness. They are pillars, they are stepping stones. No incarnation, no Golgotha, no salvation would be possible without these individuals, or without these stages, Noahidian stage, Cainic stage, Adamic stage. This child is born. This is during the time of the highest persecution. And he has a very smart sister by name Mary, Mariam. And this sister, when he's born, his name is Moses, it places him on a basket woven out of reeds, basket that maybe we can even imagine as an enclosed, kind of a little cradle / casket. Again, I spoke about it on Monday in reference to the word used for the Ark of Noah, which is imagined as a great ship. In reality, that word Teba is the same, one word used for the Ark of Noah and for the basket cradle into which the baby is being placed, Moses. And the sister sees that Pharaoh's daughter, the princess of Egypt, together with her court, is sailing on a big boat among the reeds in a procession, and she sends that her brother towards the ship. In the moment of destiny, Christ moment, happens. The daughter of Pharaoh, the princess, sees, what is this? She's curious. Fetch it for me. They fetch it for her. They open, there's a baby. She looks at him and she loves him. She takes him as his own. She takes Moses, she adopts him. He is ever since brought up, not as a Hebrew. He has no idea that he's Hebrew. He's brought up as a prince of Egypt, which means also from the very young age, he is being gradually initiated in the ancient mysteries of Egyptian religion, mysteries of death and resurrection, according to how the Egyptians understood them, had them. He is predestined to be next pharaoh of Egypt without knowing that he is of different consciousness stream / blood. So think about this combination of streams again. Different types of consciousness. And now these different types of consciousness are being initiated in Egyptian mysteries. And at some point, something happens. After he's initiated, you see, part of the initiation rite means that a human being is connected with a higher spiritual being. Normally, we have our angel. Everyone has an angel, not everybody is connected to our angels. In our times, this initiation, reconnection with the angel can happen in two ways. Either we will do it and we will strive towards having a relationship, conscious relationship with our angel, guardian angel, or our angel will act upon our biography in a way that we will wake up to his existence. And these interventions are typically very drastic. We call them biographical crises. In terms of the Egyptian initiation, this wasn't connection with your the Pharaoh's personal guardian angel, but with the angel, leading archangel of the entire nation. That was the power, that divine power that the Egyptian could see in their pharaohs. They would see the god Osiris, but in reality, from the anthroposophical point of view, that would be archangel, the leading spirit of the entire folk, dwelling, incorporated in the ether body of the Egyptian pharaoh. Moses is being on the way to go through this initiation, and then something happens. Of course, he's being initiated, goes through death, 3 days, 3 nights death, reemerges connected to a spiritual being that is technically an archangel guardian of the folk. But Moses is not Egyptian, he's Hebrew. So unbeknownst to his Egyptian initiators and to himself, he in fact gets connected with the genius, the guiding spirit archangel of the tribe of Israel, which is with whom Jacob is wrestling, Michael. And in Moses, unbeknownst to his consciousness, so to speak, this Michaelic will that is directed on protecting his folk awakens. And there's this moment when he sees Egyptian abusing a Hebrew, and he steps in and accidentally kills the Egyptian soldier. He's 40 years old, Moses, and it's such a shock for him, and it's such a shock for those who see him in this moment that he has to flee. He escapes from Egypt, the heir to throne. And he's gone for a long time. You know for how long? How long is Moses away before he comes back and leads the Hebrews out of Egypt? What would you say? 40 years. The question is, where was he and what is he doing in those 40 years? The Bible speaks about it. He goes into the desert, in that part of the desert that later he leads the Jews out of Egypt, Sinai Peninsula. And there he becomes a student of a Midian, it's the name of the folk, priest. Midianites are actually descendants of the Hagar and Ishmael's son. They're Arabs, as we would say today. He joins the mystery temple school, esoteric stream of this Midian priest by name Jethro. And there for 40 years, Jethro teaches Moses how to connect with the spiritual beings through his senses. Imagine that whole stream. I indicated that yesterday when we were speaking about Abraham's firstborn Ishmael. Before the promised child Isaac was born, agreement was between Sarah and Abraham. Sarah will give her maid to Abraham for a wife just to secure the progeny. Hagar, that maid, is connected with the Arabic stream. They've been cast away when Isaac is born, and through karmic destiny, weaving branches, this spirituality of the Midian priest Jethro is developed. That is actually legacy of Ishmael. So you see, Moses flees, becomes a student of Ishmael. See how this divine planned Christ being works through those karmic streams that connect different types of spirituality. It was necessary for Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to shed all those elements from their genetics. I mean Ishmael, I mean Joseph, and yet they, in a due time, come back to the chosen folk, not as genetics, but as a cultural legacy. They're no longer bodily elements. They were cast out and they come back to the chosen folk. They need to, in order to provide the soul for the Christ. This Arab stream, Egyptian stream, it all comes back to Moses, who is already initiated in initiation of Egypt. 40 years. Had this not happened, this teaching into the wisdom of desert, wisdom of the desert, very elemental places. What is your experience of water in the desert for 40 years? Experience of air, movement of the sand. All this for 40 years Moses develops. Had he not developed this, he would have never been able to have this vision of the burning bush. He would have never been able to follow the pillar of fire and smoke that led them from Egypt to Kadesh. He was not equipped with that. Egyptian initiation was initiation in the inner depth of the human being, all the way to the bones. You can see they would have to enter those buildings into the night, into the depths, inner vision. Hebrew initiation, anyway, was stripped from any actually possibility, so to speak, to see into nature more and more. That was a requirement. And this now comes back to Moses through his teaching. So he, after 40 years, he has this moment at the mountain. He sees burning bush. It burns, but it doesn't combust. So what is this? We see through this that through a physical, super sensible event, actually through physical flame, related to that is that at that time of geological history of that part of the earth, the volcanic processes were still very much awake. It was not impossible that out of a crack in the rock, all of a sudden a steam of a geyser or a little flame of fire would appear. In that, Moses steers, he looks into it, and through physical phenomena of fire, through his still clairvoyant vision, he gets into and he enters the sphere of the primordial warmth, primordial fire, the fire of what we know from anthroposophy of Saturn, the beginnings. In the beginning was warmth. There, two very important things take place. Number one, this is the origin of the book of Genesis, and in fact, all 5 books of Moses. Have you ever asked yourself, who did write those stories of creation, 7 days, the cosmic 7 Holy Week of creation? Moses, he is the author of this, out of this moment of seeing into the fire through Midianic Jethro's initiation. The second thing, even more important, is that the voice and the angel that appears to him in this flame says to him, now you go back and you lead my people out of Egypt. They forgot that I have mission for them. And Moses, you see, this is amazing. This intellect is already so developed in him, sharpened. He's not a basic soul. He's a well-educated, trained Egyptian too. And he asked, but what should I tell them when I go back to Egypt, when there's a death sentence on me? What should I tell them who sends me? And this is the moment, first time ever and forever, that being, Elyon, the highest God, utters his name. And what does he say? Tell them that I am sent you. I am the I am. Tell them that I am sent you. 3 times he repeats that name, the divine being, and by the 3rd time he says, I am the Lord whom your ancestors, Jacob, Isaac, Abraham, had known as the great Elohim. Try to recreate this moment. This is very often overlooked. This is the most important moment in the history of human evolution prior to the mystery of Golgotha. What does it mean from this point of view of descent, gradual descent of this being, primordial being to the earth? That means that the Christ had left the sphere of moon, spiritually speaking, and has now touched, anchored in the elemental processes of the earth. He is the warmth of the volcanic processes. He's the steam. He's the life of earth itself for the first time. Just like on Good Friday, the being of Christ had completely united, penetrated the most physical aspect of the human body, the bone structure of the body of Jesus. This, on a macrocosmic level, happens in this moment on Mount Horeb, around this time when Moses sees the Christ, who introduces himself to him as I am, the I of the universe, the I of cosmos, takes on inhabitants in the elemental layer of the life of the planet Earth. He goes back to Egypt. He brings, the whole plagues. Plagues is a whole other subject. In fact, this is when the stage of the Kali Yuga, the darkening, is becoming something of a daily experience of the Egyptians. So in those 10 plagues of Egypt, we have actually pictures of chaos that ensued when people all of a sudden are unplugged from their ability to see in the spirit. This allows the Jews to leave, and what happens on the night before they leave? The great ritual of Pascha is initiated. What is the content? What is the main substance of the Paschal ritual still this week? The lamb. Paschal lamb. I spoke about it yesterday in terms of the sacrifice on Moriah. I mentioned that earlier on. Lamb in the esoteric language of nature, of symbolic cosmic language, lamb has always was related to this capacity to use the organ of the two-petal lotus flower. When you look at Michelangelo's sculpture of Moses, this beautiful, powerful Zeus-like figure, Michelangelo intentionally carved horns on Moses, which until today is a debate among art historians and theologians why. It has to do with the word that is used in the Hebrew Bible, where keran is the same word for horn and for ray. So at some point, rays. At some point in that story, and this is related to the fact when Moses brought the tablets with the law, when he came back from the mountain, when he was dwelling in those elemental forces where Christ was active, he came down, and his own, including his brother Aaron, were terrified of him because it is described in the Bible, his face was raying out rays. He was horned. In order so that the chosen nation, these 12 streams that are planting seeds for the modern human being as well, that they can actually wake up from this dream, 400 years long dream of Egypt, where they kind of fell back in the old consciousness capacity. It is necessary that sacrifice that Isaac was subject to on Mount Moriah, the ram sacrifice, is now done, is now legacy of the entire Hebrew folk. And that's what happens. On the liturgical level, in the service, there is a picture for that, just like our service is a picture of the spiritual process that takes place in this community, that takes place in the being of the earth. On a formal liturgical level, that is the festival, the ritual of Pascha, where a young ram is being sacrificed and something of his blood is being inscribed on the door. The angel of death goes through Egypt that night, and the firstborn of the Egyptians are dead. That means Egypt no longer has future. That's the actual picture behind it. The potency, spiritual potency, the firstborns are no longer able to carry that impulse from the past into the future. And on the other hand, in the entire nation, in the entire 12 tribes, and offering a sacrifice that connected them with this ancient clairvoyance is being made. This is a precursor. This is necessary for them to actually leave Egypt. Leaving Egypt, leaving that well-being of ancient clairvoyance was not possible without sacrificing something of in the entire nation. This is still celebrated through our Hebrew Jewish friends every year during the same week that we celebrate Holy Week, the Passover. Tomorrow I'll speak about it more in the context of the Last Supper and Christ's priestly deed of bringing this to the repose, the Paschal ritual, and bringing on the new liturgy, the new service of bread and wine. How incredibly complicated is this process that we often just reduce to saying, I'm Christian and I believe in Christ. If you do believe in Christ, if you take Christ into your thinking, in your life, in your existence, you're actually connecting with the entire stream of human evolution through generations. Again, it is not something that by no means belongs to one nation, one bloodstream. What Moses did is not due to a particular state or nation. Even in his story, you see how many cultural streams are connecting: Egyptian, Hebrew, Arab. He did that on behalf of the entire humanity. Leaving Egypt was a task given to this representational part of humanity, the Hebrew folk with 12 tribes. But they did it on behalf of the entire evolution of humankind, cultural, spiritual evolution. In us, all this lives today, reverberates as more than an echo. Actually, we are descendants spiritually, no longer as a blood descendants, but etherically, spiritually speaking, we're descendants of these tribes too. They cut through humanity with their race. I'll speak about it a little bit more tomorrow. Are you the descendants of Joseph? Are you the descendants of Judah? Are you the descendants of Ephraim? There are specific qualities of intelligence, of sensation, of soul that Moses brought out of ignorance, out of Egypt, so that can, in freedom between these two empires that were in decline, Babylonia and Egypt, this can create the new chalice for the new type of humanity. Thousands of years passed, and this zealot Orthodox Jew, Pharisee by name Saul of Tarsus, a year or so after the crucifixion, when all of a sudden this Christ impulse is stirring the atmosphere of the pious Orthodox mood of prayer of the Jews in Jerusalem, becomes a little bit too much. That message of love, that message of Messiah did incarnate, and we have killed him, and now he's alive for all of us. This becomes really politically and religiously incorrect, and this very, very powerful Orthodox Saul receives a letter that gives him the right to persecute, jail, and kill those who spread such terrible lies that Messiah was just a simple person who died most embarrassing death on the cross, and moreover, he is now alive in the hearts of those who recognize him. He wants to kill. He's so angry not because he necessarily he hates Christians, but he possesses the knowledge of all this. For him, Messiah could not die on the cross, could not be beaten or whipped. Messiah is the power that was scheduled, that the Jews were waiting for to come and to turn them into the most powerful kingdom on the planet. So don't lie, don't mock my Messiah, says Saul. And with that intention, he goes, and on the way towards Damascus, in Syria, north of Holy Land, he is passing through the stretch of sand, we can imagine, towards this beautiful primordial oasis, Damascus. And there, in the midday, in full power of the sun, something strikes him. he has not only a spiritual but all the way to physical body experience so powerful that he falls off the horse. And he hears the voice. And he asks, who is doing this to me? I'm powerful. You don't know who I am. Who is this? And the voice says, I am Jesus, the one whom you persecute. The one who was with no name, the one whose name was announced as the I am, in this moment on the way to Damascus, introduces himself by his human name, Jesus, whom you persecute. In other words, he says, don't look for any Christ anymore. Don't look for some power, some magic, some clairvoyant capacity. The new seeing, the new clairvoyance is through Jesus of Nazareth.